I learned what happened that night not because someone confessed, but because something followed my sister home. The power came back on, the music restarted, people laughed in relief, and the birthday party continued as if nothing had gone wrong. But by then, it was already too late. Something that had been hanging above us, something we were never meant to notice, had come down, and only one of us realized it. If you have ever been in a room full of people when the lights suddenly go out, you know the feeling. The air changes first. It thickens, like the room has taken a careful breath and is deciding whether to exhale. Sound compresses. 100 small noises, shoes on tile, plastic balloons rubbing together. The wet click of a phone case in someone's palm rush forward to replace the music that was there a second ago. Your eyes don't adjust right away. They reach. They search. They beg for edges, for shapes, for any proof that you still know where your body ends and the darkness begins. And in those seconds, before the logic catches up, the mind does what it always does when sight is taken away. It invents. That is when it moves. My son Mateo was turning 8. He had only one fear that no amount of reasoning, reassurance, or patient exposure had ever managed to soften. Clowns. Not the cheerful cartoon faces, printed on cups. Not the balloons twisted into animals. Mateo was afraid of the real ones. The ones that tried too hard to look friendly. The ones who stood still, a beat too long. The ones whose smiles never changed. Whose eyes didn't seem to follow the rest of their faces. If a clown appeared on television, Mateo didn't scream. He went silent. He covered his eyes and pressed his forehead into my side. If he saw a costume in a store window, he stopped walking entirely, as if his legs had forgotten how. His breathing turned shallow. His fingers dug into my arm, anchoring himself to me like he was holding on to the only thing that could keep him from being pulled away. We didn't know why it started. When he was younger, he had seen a clown at a neighborhood event. The clown had leaned too close. Mateo had smelled something sour and sweet at the same time. Old makeup and cheap candy. The clown's gloves had been damp. Mateo told me later that the clown's face was smiling, but the eyes looked tired and angry. That was the first time he had ever looked at me like he didn't trust the world. After that, clowns became a category of danger in his mind. A single image was enough to set it off. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't something he outgrew. It settled into him like a splinter and stayed. So, when my younger sister Diana offered to organize a proper birthday party for him, I agreed with one condition, spoken clearly and without room for interpretation. No clowns. Diana promised immediately. She always did. She loved Mateo, like he was her own. She had decided not to have children, a choice she never explained, and that no one had ever dared to interrogate. But when it came to her nephews, she showed up early and stayed late. She was the aunt who remembered small details, who knew what Mateo liked on his pizza, who carried Band-Aids in her purse, who listened, really listened, even when a child's fears sounded unreasonable. If she said there would be no clowns, I believed her. She spent days visiting party venues around the city. She sent me photos, voice notes, screenshots of packages and prices. One place was too expensive for what it offered. Another had dim lighting and carpets that smelled faintly of mildew. Another was loud, cramped, and so close to a main road that the walls vibrated when trucks passed. Then she found one, a little farther out, past the neighborhoods we usually stayed in. The venue sat behind a row of low buildings and trees. A bright sign on the front that promised fun and safety in cheerful colors. The hall inside was large, painted in bold tones, with a plastic jungle gym full of slides and nets, a ball pit, padded floors, and a reinforced ceiling beam with a pulley system for hanging pietas. Diana told me, excited, that it looked perfect. When she went to see it, she arrived late in the afternoon. The receptionist met her at the door and guided her through the space, explaining the schedule options, the rules, what was included in the package. As they walked, the staff turned off unnecessary lights, saving electricity for the evening event that had just ended. Shadows gathered in the corners of the hall. The bright paint on the walls looked different in the dimness, like it had aged 10 years. Everything Diana saw felt normal, clean, organized, safe. Then, just before leaving, she noticed something at the far end of the room, near where the children's tables would be set up. Someone was standing there, a clown, not performing, not waving, not moving at all, just standing in the half-dark, facing the room as if waiting to be noticed. Diana assumed it was an entertainer preparing for another event. She felt irritation first, not fear. It was a business. People worked here. Maybe the clown was an employee. Maybe he was part of some package. Whatever the explanation, she wasn't going to risk Mateo seeing a clown on his birthday. She walked toward the figure, already rehearsing the words in her head. She would be polite but firm. She would say, clearly, that they would not be hiring a clown, that there should be no clown on the premises during the party, that this was non-negotiable. As she got closer, the clown stepped sideways, as if avoiding her. The movement was quick and oddly quiet, almost playful, like the beginning of a game of hide and seek. Diana's irritation sharpened into confusion. She followed. The clown moved again, slipping behind the tables deeper into the shadowed corner. Diana picked up her pace, expecting to see him duck into a door or move behind a curtain. She reached the end of the row. There was nowhere he could have gone. No doors, no curtains, no storage closets. Just empty space, stacked chairs, and the dull echo of her own footsteps on tile. Diana stood there longer than she should have, staring at a corner that was suddenly too dark for such a bright place. She felt the skin on the back of her neck tighten. She told herself immediately that this was ridiculous. She was tired. The lights were low. Her mind had filled in the shape of a person where there was none. Still unsettled, she returned to the reception desk and asked, calmly, if they offered clown entertainment packages. The receptionist smiled brightly. Would you like to add one? Diana said no. She repeated it more firmly, so there would be no misunderstanding. Then she asked about the clown she had just seen in the hall. The receptionist frowned, clearly puzzled. She stood up, walked with Diana back into the hall, stopped near the center, and pointed upward. High above them, attached to the ceiling beam, was a clown figure. It wasn't a person, it was a decoration. A rigid, life-sized clown statue perched on the beam, gripping the pulley system used to raise and lower the piata. Its painted smile was wide and exaggerated. Its eyes were glossy and empty, reflecting the little light left in the room. It looked down at the floor, as if watching the space below. The receptionist laughed lightly and said it had always been there. Diana felt foolish. She blamed the lighting, the long day, the weird way shadows could trick the eye. She told herself she must have mistaken the decoration for a person in the dimness. But one detail refused to settle into logic. She had watched it move. She could still feel the shift in her stomach, the sense of the clown stepping away from her as if it knew she was approaching. She didn't mention that. She didn't want to sound dramatic. She didn't want to make trouble. She signed the contract. She paid the deposit. She thanked the receptionist and left. She did not tell me about the clown. Maybe she thought she had imagined it. Maybe she didn't want to worry me. Maybe she believed that if she said it out loud, it would become real. The day of the party arrived bright and warm. Matteo woke up early, vibrating with excitement. He asked if his friends would come, if there would be cake, if he could go in the ball pit first. I dressed him, fixed his hair, and told myself, again, that this would be a good day. Just a good day. When we arrived at the venue, the hall was already alive with color and noise. Balloons floated in clusters. Paper decorations hung from the walls. Music echoed off the painted surfaces. Children ran between the tables and the play structures, their laughter bouncing in all directions like rubber balls. Matteo didn't hesitate. He took off toward the jungle gym, disappearing into the plastic maze almost immediately. His earlier anxiety, his usual vigilance, vanished under the momentum of being 8 years old in a room designed to feed that energy. Diana, however, barely stepped inside before lifting her eyes toward the ceiling. The clown was no longer visible. Instead, something bulky hung from the beam, wrapped entirely in a large red cloth. The fabric was thick and heavy, tied tightly around whatever shape lay beneath it. It sagged slightly, as if weighed down, as if the beam were bearing the quiet burden of it. Diana's face changed the moment she saw it. Not fear exactly, something more complicated. A tightening, a calculation, like someone trying to decide whether a threat is real or imagined, while already knowing it will matter. She walked straight to the manager's office, leaving her purse on the nearest chair as if she might need her hands free. I didn't follow immediately. I was busy greeting parents, answering questions, checking that Matteo had taken off his shoes in the padded area. When Diana returned, she forced a smile. It was the kind of smile people wear when they're trying not to let anyone see what's happening inside them. I asked if everything was okay. She leaned close to my ear and whispered, "The clown is still there." My stomach dropped. "What? It's covered," she said quickly. "It's fine. It's covered." Covered didn't feel like fine. Covered felt like hiding. Diana told me she reminded the manager that she had been promised the clown would be removed. He had smiled politely, the practiced smile of someone used to smoothing over concerns. He said it couldn't be taken down. It was part of the structure. But it had been covered, just as requested. Only someone who knows it's there would notice, he said. The phrase lodged in Diana's chest like a pebble you can't swallow. She returned to the party trying to shake the feeling. She didn't want to cause a scene. She didn't want to scare Matteo. She told herself it was just a decoration, plastic and paint and fabric. It couldn't do anything. It couldn't hurt anyone. It couldn't move still. She didn't sit with her back to it. She kept drifting, always placing herself where she could see the beam without looking like she was watching it. The party progressed. Food was served. Parents chatted, laughing at small talk, scrolling through their phones. The air smelled like pizza, sugary punch, and warm plastic from the play structures. Every now and then, the ball pit released a faint rubbery odor, like a new toy straight out of a box. Mateo ran to me once, cheeks flushed, and asked if it was time for cake yet. I told him soon. I wanted the day to stay light. I wanted his fear to have no place to land. Diana tried, too. She laughed at a joke. She clapped along to a game. She even took photos, leaning close to Mateo, her smile bright enough to convince anyone who didn't know her well. But every so often, when she thought no one was looking, her eyes lifted to the red-wrapped shape above the tables. Most of the celebration had already passed without incident. We were moving toward the final stretch, the cake. The singing, the last burst of excitement, before everyone would gather their children and go. Then, without warning, the power went out. Every light died at once. Music cut off mid-note, leaving a ringing silence that felt physical. For a fraction of a second, there was a stunned pause. Then the room filled with screams, not because anyone had seen something, but because darkness turns children into alarm bells. They screamed to find their parents. They screamed because the sudden absence of light felt like falling. Adults called names, voices sharp and urgent. Chairs scraped. Someone knocked into a table. A cup spilled. Somewhere in the play structure, a child cried in a high, panicked wail that made every parent's body react, like a switch had been flipped. Phones came out immediately. White screens flashed on, casting harsh, unnatural light across the hall. Faces appeared pale and distorted. The cheerful decorations that had looked harmless seconds earlier now seemed grotesque and wrong. Balloons hung like swollen heads from the ceiling. The ball pit became a dark well, its colorful spheres reduced to dull shapes that could hide anything. Shadows stretched and twisted across the walls, moving when no one moved, because the phone lights moved in shaky hands. In the confusion, no one noticed the sound at first. A soft, heavy thump, fabric hitting the floor. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of sound you might ignore if your child weren't screaming and the room weren't swallowed in darkness. Diana heard it. Her head snapped toward the children's tables. In the scattered phone light, she saw the red cloth lying in a loose heap near the chairs. No longer tied, no longer elevated, as if someone had dropped it from above. The sight made her skin turn cold. She looked up. The beam was empty. The pulley hung motionless, swaying only slightly, like something had just been released. The clown was gone. No one else noticed. No one was looking up. Parents were crouching to gather their kids. Kids were crying and reaching. Someone laughed nervously and said it would be back on in a second, that these things happened all the time. I felt Mateo's small hands clamp onto my shirt. His breathing changed. He didn't scream. He went silent. That silence was worse than a scream, because it meant the fear had settled into him like a weight. Diana didn't wait for the lights to return. She pushed through the crowd toward Mateo, grabbed him by the shoulders, and lifted him into her arms, as if he weighed nothing. She held him tight, one hand over the back of his head, pressing his face into her neck so he wouldn't look around. I followed, confused and irritated, trying to understand why she was moving like we were in danger. Diana, what are you doing? I asked, raising my voice over the chaos. I'm taking him outside, she said, and her voice sounded different, thin, controlled, like a string pulled tight enough to snap. Mateo trembled against her shoulder. He whispered something into her neck, too quiet for me to hear. Diana didn't respond. She kept walking. Outside, the streetlights were out too. The darkness felt broader, heavier, as if the building had been the last container keeping it from spreading. In the distance, a utility pole sparked and hissed, flames licking upward where wires had failed. The air smelled faintly of smoke and hot metal. The blackout was real, logical, explainable. Inside the hall, panic slowly gave way to inconvenience. Adults began to laugh again, the way people do after a scare that turns out to be nothing. Someone made a joke about the power company. Someone said, "At least it's not raining." Diana didn't laugh. She stood in the parking lot with Mateo in her arms, staring at the dark entrance like she was expecting something to step out. Mateo clung to her, face hidden. I tried to take him from her. She didn't let go immediately. Her grip tightened before it loosened, as if she was handing over a fragile object. "Mateo, look at me," I said softly. "It's okay. The lights are just out." Mateo didn't look up. He whispered, I heard it. Heard what? I asked. He swallowed. The shoes. I felt a chill travel up my arms. What shoes? Mateo's voice shook. The shoes that laugh. Diana's eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time that night, I understood she had heard something too, something she didn't want to repeat. A few minutes later, the power returned. Lights flooded the hall again. The music restarted, loud and cheerful, almost aggressive in its insistence on normalcy. The manager came outside, hands raised in apology, offering a free cake for the inconvenience. People smiled. They went back inside as if pulled by the comfort of light. Diana's posture didn't change. She followed us back in, but her eyes went straight to the ceiling beam. Still empty. Still wrong. If the clown had been taken down during the blackout, there should have been evidence staff on ladders. Someone carrying a rigid prop through the hall. The red cloth, folded somewhere. There was none of that. There was only the beam and the pulley, hanging there as if the clown had never existed at all. Diana's mouth went dry. She licked her lips and forced herself to smile at a parent who waved at her. Then she leaned toward me and whispered, "I'm taking him out for air. Just for a minute." "Diana, you're scaring me," I whispered back. "I know," she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. "I'm scaring me too." She insisted on taking Mateo outside, away from the noise. She walked him to a nearby store, the kind with bright fluorescent lights and shelves crammed with candy and chips. The harsh light made Mateo squint. It also made him breathe easier. He clutched a small bag of gummy candy like it was a talisman. Diana bought him a soda and talked to him about school, about his friends, about which slide was the fastest. She made jokes. She tried to wrap him in a cocoon of ordinary conversation. But even there, in the store, I watched her eyes drift upward to the ceiling tiles, to the fluorescent fixtures, to the corners where the light didn't fully settle, like she was afraid that if she forgot to look up, something would appear. I stayed behind at the party, trying to keep everything smooth. I didn't want Mateo to associate his birthday with fear. I cut cake, smiled at parents, gathered gifts, thanked people for coming. I moved through the hall with the determined cheerfulness of someone trying to hold a crumbling wall in place with bare hands. When Diana returned with Mateo, the boy looked calmer, but quieter. His eyes stayed low. He didn't look at the ceiling once. I almost felt grateful for that. The party ended. Parents began to leave, children dragging goodie bags and balloons, exhausted and sugar high. The hall emptied slowly. The bright music sounded too loud for the smaller number of people left inside. Like the room didn't know how to adjust, Diana stayed behind to speak with the staff about the deposit and the promised compensation. She said she needed to make sure everything was accounted for. She said it like it mattered, like money was something she could control when everything else had slipped. Mateo and I waited outside, in the warm night air. A few parents lingered in the parking lot, chatting, watching their kids run in circles one last time. We stood near my car, and I tried to relax my shoulders. "Mom," Mateo said, tugging my sleeve. "What is it?" "Is the clown gone?" he asked, voice small. My mouth went dry. "There wasn't a clown, honey." Mateo frowned. He looked at the building, then back at me. "Then, why did it smell like paint?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know what answer would help. Diana came out a few minutes later. She looked tired, like the night had taken something from her that she couldn't name. She hugged Mateo hard. Then she hugged me. "You're good?" I asked. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, I'm fine. I want to go home." She got into her car, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. That was when I saw it. A strip of red fabric trailed from the back of her car. It was caught in the trunk, dragging along the pavement. With each rotation of the wheels, it stretched farther, like something being slowly unspooled. The red looked darker under the street's weak light, like a tongue, like a wound. I shouted her name. I waved my arms. I even ran a few steps after her car. She didn't see me. She turned the corner and disappeared down the road, taking the red cloth with her. For a moment, I stood there frozen, my heart pounding, unable to decide whether I had actually seen what I had seen. A rational part of me tried to build an explanation fast enough to cover the fear. Maybe the venue had stuffed extra fabric into decorations. Maybe the cloth got caught on her car by accident. Maybe a child had dragged it outside. Maybe it was nothing. But another part of me, an older, more instinctive part, recognized what it meant when a thing that belonged high above the room ended up following someone into the night. I went back inside. The hall was nearly empty now. Staff were stacking chairs, wiping tables. The bright decorations looked tired under the overhead lights. The manager glanced at me, expression polite, but impatient. I asked about the red cloth. I asked if they used red fabric for anything. I asked if the clown decoration had been moved. He smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. What clown? He asked. I felt something sour twist in my stomach. The clown on the beam, I said, pointing upward. The one you covered. He followed my gesture, looked up at the beam, and shrugged lightly. There's nothing there, he said, and his voice carried a calm finality that made my skin prickle. Maybe you saw a shadow. A staff member passed behind him carrying a mop, and for a second, the manager's face flickered with annoyance as if my question had interrupted a routine. Then he smiled again. There's nothing there, he repeated. The party is over. You should go home. I looked up. The beam was there. The pulley was there. But there was no cloth, no figure, no sign that anything had ever been attached to the structure at all. No loose ties, no marks, no hooks. I could have believed for a moment that Diana had imagined the whole thing, except I had seen the red fabric trailing from her trunk. That part was not in her head. That part had been in the world. I left. The drive home felt longer than usual. Mateo fell asleep in the back seat, his mouth open, his hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, checking the darkness behind us, half expecting to see something red dragging along the road following. When I got home, I put Mateo to bed. He woke briefly, eyes glassy with sleep, and asked again, "Is the clown gone?" "Yes," I lied softly. "It's gone." He nodded, as if he wanted to believe me with his whole body. He rolled over and fell asleep again. I sat on the edge of the bed longer than necessary, listening to the quiet of my house. The refrigerator hummed. A distant dog barked. The ordinary sounds felt fragile, like they could be snapped away by a flicker of power. My phone buzzed. It was Diana. I answered immediately. "Diana, are you home?" "I'm in the driveway," she said. Her voice was strange, not panicked, but tight, controlled, like she was trying not to let the fear spill into sound. "Why are you still in the car?" I asked. "I don't want to get out," she said. I could hear her breathing. I could hear the faint crackle of the phone line. I could also hear something else, a subtle, rhythmic sound in the background, like a soft rubbing, as if something were moving against concrete. "Diana," I said carefully, "what's happening?" "The car smells wrong," she whispered. "Wrong how?" "Like old fabric," she said. "Like dust. Like something that's been shut away." Diana had always been practical. If she said the car smelled like old fabric and dust, it wasn't because she was being dramatic. It was because the smell was real enough to make her feel trapped inside it. "And I keep hearing." She stopped. "Hearing what?" I asked. "Under the car," she said. "Like shoes." My skin went cold. "You mean like someone walking?" "No," she whispered. "Like someone shifting. Like rubber soles on concrete." I wanted to tell her she was imagining it. I wanted to give her a clean explanation. Maybe a stray animal under the car, maybe a neighbor outside, maybe her nerves. But the sound through the phone was too steady to ignore. "Turn on your porch light," I told her. "It's on," she said, and then, after a pause, it flickered when I pulled in. Twice, like it couldn't decide. My throat tightened. "Deanna, get out of the car. Come inside." "I can't," she said, and now her voice trembled. "If I open the door, I'll have to look down, and I don't want to look down." A memory flashed through my mind, something my grandmother used to say during blackouts. "Don't look up into the dark. Don't look down into it either. Just keep your eyes on what's lit." In our family, it was treated like an old superstition, the kind you repeat without believing. I understood it differently now. "Open the trunk," I said. Diana exhaled sharply, like she had been waiting for someone else to say it. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." I heard the click of her seatbelt, the faint creak of the car as she shifted, then the beep of the key fob, then silence. For a long second, I heard nothing but her breathing. Then I heard the trunk pop open, and underneath that sound, I heard something else so faint, I might have missed it if my whole body hadn't been listening. A soft scrape, like fabric dragging over metal. Diana made a sound that wasn't a scream and wasn't a sob, more like a sharp inhale that caught on something. "It's not there," she whispered. "What's not there?" I asked, though I already knew. "The cloth," she said. "The red cloth. It's not in the trunk." My hands tightened around the phone. "Then why was it stuck?" "I don't know," she said quickly. "I don't know. I swear I didn't." She stopped abruptly. "What?" I asked. "There are handprints," she whispered, and now her voice was thin and distant, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "On the inside." "Handprints?" I repeated. "They're dark," she said. "Like grease. Like dirt. like someone pressed their hands there. I couldn't speak. My mind tried to picture it logically. A mechanic's fingerprints, her own hands, dirty from something. Smudges. But Diana had been at a children's party. She hadn't been working with tools, and she wasn't the kind of person to miss something that obvious. "Deanna," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Close the trunk. Get inside your house. Call someone, turn on every light." "I did," she said, and her breathing quickened. "Everything is on, everything is bright, and I still feel like I'm in the dark." I wanted to drive to her immediately, but my son was asleep, and the thought of taking him out into the night made my stomach twist. Instead, I stayed on the phone. "Listen," I told her. "Maybe the cloth got caught and fell off on the road, maybe." "Don't," she interrupted, and her tone was sharp enough to cut. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Try to make it normal," she said. "It's not normal," I swallowed. "What do you think it is then?" Diana didn't answer immediately. I heard her footsteps now, quick and careful, like she was walking without wanting to make noise. Then I heard a door open and shut, locks clicking, her breathing as she leaned against a wall. Finally she said, "When the lights went out." I saw the cloth drop, and when the lights came back, the beam was empty. That means it wasn't covered anymore. It wasn't tied. It wasn't stuck. Her voice wavered. It was free. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair, the phone pressed to my ear, my other hand covering my mouth. Diana kept talking. Like once she started, she couldn't stop. "I didn't tell you before," she said. "When I first saw it at the venue, I thought it was a person. I saw it move. I saw it step away from me. I closed my eyes. And when the receptionist pointed to the beam," Diana continued, "I told myself I was tired, that my brain was making shapes in the dark. I told myself I was being stupid." Her voice dropped lower, but tonight, in the blackout, it felt like the room wanted me to look up, like it was pulling my eyes toward that beam. I thought of Mateo whispering about laughing shoes. "Diana," I said, "did you hear anything in the dark?" There was a pause so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Yes," just one word, heavy and final. "Like what?" She exhaled slowly, like someone shifting weight, like shoes, like a little squeak, like rubber. A chill ran over my scalp. "I heard it too," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Mateo said he heard shoes." Diana made a strangled sound. "He heard it?" "He said the shoes laugh," I said, and the moment the words left my mouth, I regretted saying them, as if speaking it gave it permission. Diana went quiet again. When she spoke, her voice was steadier but not calmer. "Don't tell him," she said. "I won't," I promised. Another sound came through the phone, a soft tap, like something striking glass. Diana inhaled sharply. "What was that?" I asked. "Nothing," she lied, too quickly. "Diana," I said. "It's nothing," she snapped, and then her voice cracked. I'm sorry. She stopped, and I heard her swallow, heard the wet sound of fear in her throat. "It's at the window," she whispered. My heart lurched. "What is?" "I don't know," she said. "I can't see it. The porch light is on. The living room light is on, but there's a shadow on the glass like someone is standing too close." I couldn't breathe properly. "Call the police," I said. Diana laughed once, bitter and breathless. "And say what?" "That a clown decoration followed me home." "Say someone is outside," I insisted. She didn't answer. The tapping came again, louder this time, and then stopped. Then there was a slow sound, faint, drawn out like something sliding along the glass. Diana whispered, "It's like fabric." My stomach turned. "Diana," I said urgently, "go to a room without windows. Stay there, lock yourself in." She moved. I heard her footsteps, fast and uneven. A door opened. Shut. Another lock clicked. For a few seconds, the only sound was her breathing. Then, very softly, she said, "It smells like it again." "In the house?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered, "like the cloth is here, like the dust is here, like it's inside the walls." I wanted to offer her a prayer, but we weren't that kind of family. We didn't have rituals. We had jokes and logic and denial. Still, a memory surfaced. A relative once told me that at children's parties, the pieta wasn't just a game. It was a kind of symbolic release. You blindfold a child and make them swing at a bright, festive shape until it breaks and spills its contents. The child laughs. The adults laugh. Everyone rushes forward to gather candy like a small, controlled chaos meant to let something out safely. I had always thought it was just tradition. Now, in the quiet of my kitchen, I wondered what else that tradition might have been built to contain. Diana, I said slowly, when you talked to the manager, did he say anything strange? She hesitated. He said, it's part of the structure, she replied. He said it can't be removed, he said. Only someone who knows it's there would notice. The same phrase, the same calm, as if ignorance was a shield. That's a rule, Diana whispered, as if thinking it for the first time. Not a reassurance, a rule. I didn't know what to say. Minutes passed. Diana stayed in the room. I stayed on the phone. The night outside my window was normal, calm, quiet. But my body felt tuned to a frequency I had never had to hear before. Every hum of the refrigerator sounded like a warning. Every creak in the house sounded like a footstep. Mateo stirred in his bed down the hall. I held my breath until he settled again. Finally, Diana said very softly, I'm going to sell the car. What? The car, she repeated, voice flat. I don't care what it costs. I don't care if it makes sense. I'm selling it. You can't let this ruin your life, I said, and even as I spoke, I knew it was the wrong sentence. Diana let out a quiet, humorless breath. It already did, she whispered. The line went silent for a moment. When she spoke again, it was barely audible. Adriana, she said, using my name like she needed to remind herself I was real. If the lights ever go out again, don't look up. I swallowed hard. Okay. Promise me. I promise. We ended the call after that. Not because we were okay, but because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't invite it closer. The next day, Diana came to my house in the afternoon. In daylight, she looked almost normal. Her hair was neat. Her clothes were clean. She even smiled at Mateo, but her eyes were tired in a way I hadn't seen before, like she had spent the night holding her breath. Mateo watched her carefully. Children know when adults are pretending. Did you see it? He asked her suddenly while I poured juice at the kitchen counter. Diana froze, just for a second. Then she crouched so she was level with him. See what? She asked gently. Mateo stared at her, as if deciding whether she was safe enough to tell the truth to. Then, he whispered, the smile in the dark. Diana's throat bobbed. Her smile didn't move. There was no smile, she said softly. It was just the lights going out. Mateo's eyes narrowed. He didn't look convinced, but he nodded, because that is what children do when the adult answer is the only bridge out of their fear. Diana didn't stay long. She said she had errands. She said she was tired. She hugged Mateo again, tighter this time, and I felt her hands tremble against his back. After she left, I sat with Mateo and asked him what he remembered. He told me he remembered the darkness. He remembered the sound of phones. He remembered people shouting. He remembered the smell, like paint and dust and something sweet underneath it, that made his stomach hurt. And the shoes, he whispered. What about the shoes? They were close, he said, eyes fixed on the floor, like right behind the tables. My skin prickled. Did you see anything? I asked. Mateo shook his head. I didn't want to look. That frightened me more than if he had, because it meant the fear had done its job. It had taught him, instinctively, that looking is a kind of invitation. 3 weeks later, Diana sold her car. She didn't tell me the details. She didn't talk about the handprints again. She didn't talk about the red cloth again. But she changed. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't become a different person overnight. It was smaller than that, subtler, the way a crack spreads in glass slowly, and then suddenly makes the whole pane unreliable. Whenever she walked into a room, her eyes went up first, sweeping beams, door frames, corners near the ceiling. If the lights flickered in a restaurant, she stiffened. If a storm rolled in and the power blinked, she stopped speaking mid-sentence until the lights stabilized. Once, months later, we were in a grocery store when the electricity dipped. For half a second, the fluorescent lights blinked and returned. Most people didn't even react. Diana's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist so hard it hurt. Don't, she whispered. Don't what? I asked. Don't look, she said, and her eyes were already fixed upward, scanning the ceiling as if expecting a red shape to be waiting. The lights stayed on. Nothing happened. People kept shopping. Diana released my wrist slowly, embarrassed. It's stupid, she said, laughing lightly, the way people laugh when they want to erase what just occurred. It's not, I said. She didn't answer. I never went back to that venue. I told other parents we chose a different place. I told myself I was being cautious. I told myself it was just trauma. But sometimes, late at night, when my house is quiet and the world feels thin, I think about the manager's smile when I asked about the clown. What clown? I think about the way he looked at me, calm and dismissive, as if he knew that as long as I didn't name it, it would remain contained. And I think about the red cloth. I keep circling back to that, Because fabric doesn't decide to follow a person. Fabric doesn't wedge itself into a trunk and trail behind a moving car, like a living tongue. Fabric doesn't disappear from a trunk and leave dark handprints behind as if someone held on from the inside. Unless it was never just fabric, unless the cloth was a cover in the truest sense, something used to hide what people refuse to acknowledge. Something used to keep it from being seen, because being seen is the first step toward being freed. Maybe that's why so many old rules survive in families, even when no one believes them anymore. Don't whistle at night. Don't answer when someone calls your name from the dark. Don't look up when the lights go out. Maybe people learned those rules not because they were superstitious, but because someone, somewhere, paid the price for breaking them. The night of Mateo's party, the lights went out and came back on. That should have been the end of it. A normal inconvenience. A story we would laugh about later. Instead, it became something else. An invisible boundary crossed. A latch undone. Diana was the one who noticed the covered shape. Diana was the one who watched the cloth drop. Diana was the one who looked up and saw the beam empty. Diana was the one whose car carried the red cloth away. Only someone who knows it's there would notice. Only someone who notices becomes responsible. Sometimes I wonder if it chose her because she cared enough to fight for Mateo's fear, because she tried to protect him, because she insisted there would be no clowns. Or maybe it chose her for a simpler reason. She saw it first, and she didn't look away. In the years since, Mateo has gotten older. His fear has dulled around the edges, the way childhood fears sometimes do when they're forced to share space with other worries. He can see a clown image on a screen now without panicking. He can walk past a costume store without freezing, but he still hates blackouts. If the lights flicker, he goes still. If the power goes out, even for a moment, he moves closer to me automatically, his eyes lowering to the floor. And sometimes, when we're sitting together in a lit room, safe and quiet, he asks questions that don't sound like a child trying to understand. They sound like a child trying to remember a rule. "Mom," he'll say, "if the lights go out, you don't look up, right?" I always answer quickly, "Right. Even if you hear something, even then. And if you smell paint," I swallow, "especially then." He nods, satisfied, as if he has checked a lock. Diana never told me what she saw at her window that night. She never admitted anything beyond the smell, the sound, the handprints. But once, when we were alone, she said something that felt like a confession disguised as a joke. "I used to think clowns were scary because they're ugly," she said, staring at her coffee cup. "Now, I think they're scary because they're pretending." "Pretending what?" I asked. Diana's eyes lifted, automatically, to the ceiling corner above my kitchen table. "Pretending they're here for you," she whispered, "when really they're here for the dark." Then she laughed softly, as if laughing could push the sentence back into her throat. That is the part that stays with me, not the cloth, not the handprints, not even the blackout, the pretending, because that venue was a place built for pretending. Bright walls, happy music, plastic jungles, smiles everywhere. A room designed to convince children they are safe, and above it all, a figure with a painted smile, perched on a beam, holding the pulley for a piata, like it had a role to play in celebration. Maybe it did. Maybe it wasn't there to entertain. Maybe it was there to hold something in place. The night the lights went out, it didn't stay where it belonged. It came down, and then, when the lights came back on and everyone sighed with relief, it slipped away with the only person who had noticed its absence. Diana sold her car 3 weeks later. She never returned to that venue. She never allowed another party there, no matter how good the price, no matter how clean the hall looked, no matter how much staff smiled. And whenever the power flickers, now even for a second, she still looks up first. Not because she expects to see something, because she's afraid she won't. Because if there is nothing there, it might mean it's already come down. Because some things are hung high for a reason, and when the lights go out, they don't always stay where they belong.